Okay, welcome all. Thank you so much for joining us virtually here this evening. I'm Dave Javi with Plan to Place, part of the consulting team that's helping with all things public facing and engagement, including this workshop here tonight on Mariner Cove. This project is surrounded around the Shoreline Adaptation engagement effort, and this is one of those meetings to have a discussion with you all, which is vitally important as we move this process forward, which we'll find a lot about tonight. I just want to mention it takes a big team of folks to navigate this process, and you'll see some names and faces on the screen, many of which are represented here tonight that you'll get a chance to cross paths with. As we kind of go through this process, you'll hear from. But that includes members of town staff and the consultant team. So just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of who's been leading this effort. The agenda tonight, we just kind of got through that welcome and overview. I am going to actually bring up a participant poll here in a minute as well, because I'd love to know who is joining us here this evening as we kind of navigate this process to make sure that we're providing opportunity for everyone to contribute. And then we're going to have a presentation about some of the vulnerabilities in Mariner Cove to give you a sense of the input and research that's been done to date and the information we know. And then most importantly, we're going to provide some space for a Q&A from you all to provide some input to make sure that, again, and you all have the opportunity to provide us with any of your concerns or feedback or questions that you might have that we could answer here tonight. So I just want to note that the meeting is going to be facilitated mainly through the Q&A at the end, but we do have chat available. If you do have any questions or comments, please do feel free to drop those in chat. We'll be monitoring those. Most likely won't be answering all the questions in chat. We'll answer those as we get to the Q&A. But that is a space for you to provide any comments or questions that you might have. And then when we get to the Q&A at the end, we can still use chat, but we'd love to hear from you verbally as well. And we'll use the raise hand feature, which I'm sure you all are aware of these days after using Zoom as long as we have. But that is at the bottom of your toolbar. If you click that, it'll raise the hand, and then I'll go ahead and unmute you. And if you are calling in, you could also access that with the *9 feature. And when we get to the facilitation, I just want to note that we're going to try to keep comments, if possible, to around a couple minutes, mainly because we have such a great turnout. We want to make sure that we provide as much space as possible for everyone to contribute. So I will go ahead and kind of move through that space efficiently. But again, we definitely want to provide you with as much time to give us your feedback here tonight. So with that, we're going to go ahead and launch a participant poll right here through Zoom. And that is going to give you an opportunity to let us know a little bit about yourself and why you are joining us here tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that now and hand it over to Quentin.
Thanks so much, Dave. So hopefully all of you can see the little poll that just popped up. It's 5 questions, so make sure you scroll all the way down and answer all 5. And we really do this, like Dave said, just to get a sense of who's in the room with us now and to start gauging your initial feelings and experiences around flooding in Corte Madera's shoreline. So looks like 3 folks have taken it. Awesome. Responses are starting to trickle in. Okay, we're seeing all the responses start to come in here. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourself.
Maybe we'll just wait 1 more minute here. It looks like the majority of you have had a chance to plug in. And then we'll share those results back out. I think we're probably there.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And no problem if you didn't get a chance to contribute. We'll make sure we could give you access to this again, but it does look like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll now. And then I'll hand it to you, Quentin, to do a quick overview of what we see here. And I'm gonna share that back out with you all so you can see it.
Awesome. So first question, how'd you hear about this workshop? Looks like folks saw from the A-frame signs around town. That's awesome. And through emails, the postcard, word of mouth. Everyone owns their home. Okay. Awesome. And a lot of folks have lived in Corte Madera for more than 20 years. So really long-term residents. That is super cool. 50% of people that responded have experienced flooding at their place of residence. And everyone is either very concerned or somewhat concerned. Okay, those are super interesting. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm going to pass it back over to Dave.
Thank you, Quentin. And thank you all again for taking the time to take that. That's really helpful as we jump into this presentation, but as we also continue to do outreach. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing those results and bring you back here to the presentation. And I'm going to hand it over to Phoebe. Phoebe, over to you.
All right, thank you, Dave, and good evening, everyone. My name is Phoebe Golden. I am the Climate Action and Adaptation Coordinator for the Town of Corte Madera. Before I dive into our presentation this evening, I just want to recognize that we do have Councilmember Rosa Thomas joining us this evening, as well as several of our flood board members. So thank you for joining us along with everyone. And hopefully I didn't miss anyone. I know we've been having some folks trickle in. So I will kick off this presentation by giving a quick overview of the Shoreline Adaptation Engagement Effort, which started in fall 2023. Next slide, please. So the goals of this engagement effort are to provide shoreline residents and other stakeholders like business owners and other property owners with updated information about flooding risks now and into the future, as well as provide the opportunity for everyone who's impacted by those flood risks to share their ideas, their concerns, and their needs with town staff and leaders. So we're really focusing on listening here with this effort, and we're gonna wanna hear from you some more this evening after this presentation. And the ultimate goal is to decide as a community on what the next step should be to address flood risks in our shoreline neighborhoods moving forward. Next slide. All right, so this map is showing the area that we're focusing on for this engagement effort. It's roughly aligned with the FEMA 100-year floodplain in this part of town. And the 100-year flood is the flood that statistically has a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. And this area is a priority due to its low elevation in the floodplain, as well as the fact that it experiences some flood impacts currently in certain areas. But even within this section of Corte Madera that's all in the 100-year floodplain, there are different risks and vulnerabilities related to flooding. So that's why we've held two separate workshops. So in February, we focused on Marina Village, and then tonight we're focusing on Mariner Cove, just to really talk about the differences between those neighborhoods in terms of flood risk. Another reason we're focusing on this area is that it was identified as an important next steps to re-engage with these neighborhoods in our 2021 climate adaptation assessment. So I'll pass it to RJ to talk more about that assessment and the town's previous work on flood risks.
Thanks, Phoebe. Hi, I'm RJ Stuco, Director of Public Works for the Town of Corte Madera. So I wanted to give a little background on some of the past work that's happened here in town. We have several town-wide storm drainage plans that were produced around 2007, 2008. At the county level, they prepared a sea level rise vulnerability assessment in 2017. We did a Marina Village levee or berm study in 2017. And then I think more recently, maybe many of you are familiar with the work done on the Corte Madera Climate Adaptation Assessment, which really ran from 2019 to 2021. And something on that I wanted to touch on is a couple things from that led to where we are today. For one, that was, I want to I would reference that document as more of a long-range planning document, looking out at vulnerabilities 50, 100 plus years out. Currently, we've taken that back and we're really focused on, what are our immediate needs? What should we be doing in the next 10 years to protect us for the next, say, 25 years? So this is something to keep in mind in terms of the concepts that we discuss and the horizons we're looking at. Separately, as part of that effort, one of the key things we received feedback on was that a desire for the town to kind of slow down the conversation around these, sea level rise concepts and really do a more concerted effort to engage the local community. And so that's really what sparked this shoreline engagement effort that we're in the midst of right now. Next slide, please. So here we have it. This engagement effort really started in the fall. It started with some small stakeholder meetings just to kind of get a sense of how things are since we left off from spring 2021 and a climate adaptation assessment. This then rolled into a series of slightly larger events. Attended the flood board for a kickoff. We also had a king tide pop-up event, and now we're into kind of our virtual workshop series, and this is the second of two, the prior being specific to Marina Village. And the goal here is really to wrap up and get a more try to memorialize the community's interests and goals as we conclude this engagement effort here this spring and try to really summarize that in a more defined way. Next step. So as mentioned, we started with some kind of small group stakeholder meetings, just trying to gauge people in the community. Did this kickoff on the 11th of December at the flood board meeting, had a kind of introductory workshop, two king tide pop-up events at the same time on January 10th, so we could see the actual king tides in action. We were asked to attend another kind of neighborhood-led king tide pop-up event in February, and so that was also helpful. That was hosted by others, but definitely some good information and feedback from that event as well. And then, as mentioned, we had one virtual workshop with focused on the Marina Village neighborhood. So here's just some, images of the 20 or so people that were present for the flood board introduction kickoff. We talked about goals. We talked about, this process and kind of how we intended to engage and got some good feedback. This is showing our king tide pop event. So here's our town manager, Adam Wolf, speaking to a handful of residents, showing some of the topography and other exhibits of the shoreline neighborhoods and talking about some of the challenges that we face. Some of the things that we heard were, concerns of, if there was a raised berm, what would that do for privacy and trails? There was a comments that, in addition to any sort of tidal flood barrier, we need to also account for other internal infrastructure, our storm drain system, such as pump stations and other things. And so we recognize that. Also just people wanting more information about the different types of, whether it's barrier types or strategies to deal with sea level rise and other things. So yeah, and then also the other one that really kind of was echoed more and more was just how can we do more of a phased approach and, instead of, right, fault planning for the 100-year scenario that we were kind of looking at as part of the climate adaptation assessment, how can we do it in smaller pieces and phase it in and right, what can we do in the next 10 years to really protect us for the next, say, 25, as an example of that. Next slide, please. So as we had a lot of these discussions, it really kind of made sense to staff that, there really are two separate projects here, or at least project areas, mainly driven by the topography of these two neighborhoods and how they were built. So you can see the bottom left, there's a legend with colors showing the elevations. And as you look at the Marina Village neighborhood, you'll see that, there's a lot of areas that are 6 feet or less, or between 6 and 7 feet. And the reason these aren't flooded during king tides is because they're protected by a berm or levee that wraps around them. And so, whereas Mariner Cove here, you can see, the bulk of the topography is 7 feet and up, upwards of, 10, possibly 11 in some spots. And there is no levee. So really, it's the grade itself that acts as the protection from the higher tides, and it's not reliant on a defined system. Also worth noting, we are aware of, two vulnerability spots up here at the top corner, right at the bend. You can see Marina Village levee. It says 8.3 feet at lowest point. So that's been surveyed. That's one area that we know is low relative to the rest of the levee, which is slightly higher. And then also here on the right-hand side by the Golden Hind and Ebb Tide intersection, there's a sanitary pump station, and we've had that surveyed, and it's at one of the foundation slabs, it's 7.2 feet. So that's fairly representative of that parcel. Next slide. So we're going to focus today on the Mariner Cove vulnerabilities. And so, there's a number of things that could be contributing to some of these. We'll go into detail on a couple that we think are the more, impactful. So we've got settlement, sea level rise, existing storm drain infrastructure, and potentially the need for more storm drain infrastructure. You've got, stormwater, rain runoff, and then obviously king tides, extreme tides, and any other sort of, annual or, semi-annual event here. Winds also drive up waves in the bay, so that can contribute to tides as well. Next slide, please. Now, talking about settlement, this is something that we find is really important, especially for this location. Mariner Cove, we have geotechnical boring data that shows that a lot of the neighborhood is on significant amounts of bay mud, as much as around 100 feet. And many of these areas that have already settled several feet and are predicted to continue to settle another several feet. So this table really kind of shows you, since the original development in the 50s or 60s, 1958, some have settled between 4.6 feet and 3.5 feet, and potentially could settle anywhere from 0.7 feet to 2.2 feet more. So absent of future sea level rise, the ground itself is likely to depress and lower in elevation because of this consolidation settlement. Next slide, please. So a little more here, won't go into too much detail. This is data that we were able to obtain from our one of our agency partner next door in San Rafael. This is data from the Norwegian Research Center that tracks through satellite imagery, how fast land is settling. And so here you can see the kind of darker reds and orange mean it's settling faster, whereas the lighter greens, lighter blues, and blues mean less. What we see here is that it verifies the science behind settlement. The areas that were loaded with more dirt, more fill, so more weight, are the ones that are settling at a faster rate. So we've got this kind of blue dot here, which is kind of in that Nugget and Aegis parking lot. So some development there that appears to have weight. And then also the internal parts of Mariner Cove, which were at a higher elevation. So more fill was placed on them, circa 1958. And hence they are settling at a faster rate. Next slide, please. So here are a couple photos. This is looking at the intersection of Golden High and Ebb Tide. We've got this may not be at the exact high tide of that day, but this picture is from a day where the high tide was 7.5 feet at 11 a.m. And so you can see the inundation here into the roadway. This is not a day that appeared to have rain, so this is just from tidal only, not influenced by precipitation. Here's another photo from another part, Seawolf Passage, October 24th, where we did have rain. It says about 2.97, so about 3 inches on that day, and it coincided with the 7.1 foot tide elevation at the Richmond station nearby. So basically the water has been trapped in the roadway because the pipes that usually would drain it to the bay are inundated and underwater themselves, and so they are not able to drain the water until the tides recede. One of the other things that the climate adaptation assessment did was set a goal to update our storm drain master plan. So we're approximately 2 years into that effort and hoping to wrap it up here in the next 6 months. Both the internal drainage modeling and is complicated on its own, and so is the kind of tidal influence modeling on the bay. And so, we're looking at them from both sides, and we're trying to kind of build them into one decision-making process, but do realize they really aren't, the models themselves aren't fully designed to account for both at the same time. So we're doing what we can with the information and models that we have. So this is showing from a internal drainage and precipitation standpoint with a 25-year storm, 25-year rain event, kind of what you would expect in certain parts of town. We won't go into detail on this. This will be presented likely at the end of April in more detail. And as we present the draft master plan and work toward potential adoption. Next slide. This is also from the storm drain master plan, looking at potential needs for new or added storm drain infrastructure. In particular, I want to note that it's saying that in the near term, potentially I think it's listed in our not in our very high priority, but in our high category. So potentially 10 or so years to put a pump station in at Golden High and Ebb Tide that would relieve some of the ponding that we're seeing there even today, amongst some other improvements to our storm drain network, San Clemente pump station and others. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Phoebe to talk about some of the other work we're doing as part of this effort.
Thanks, RJ. So we wanted to give a preview this evening of a tool we've been working on to visualize what flooding would look like in shoreline neighborhoods under different high tide plus storm surge scenarios. So this tool is, in a sense, a companion to the modeling that RJ just showed that's been happening as part of the Storm Drain Master Plan, which does not show tidal influences. This modeling does not show precipitation influences, but does show storm surge, tidal, wind, all those other impacts. So we've been developing this tool with Virtual Planet, which is a company that takes 2D flood modeling and projects it onto drone images and 3D models to help communities visualize flooding impacts. And some of you may have seen the visualizations of sea level rise created for Stinson Beach. Those were created by Virtual Planet in partnership with Marin County. And this tool has also been used in a couple other California communities like Santa Cruz and Long Beach, as well as in other states across the country. So we'll be previewing a few of these images tonight from the tool, and then the full tool as well as a video component will be available in the coming weeks as we finalize it.
All right, so yeah, before we show some of that results of the tool, we wanted to talk about, the model it's based on. So COSMOS stands for Coastal Storm Modeling System, was created by the United States Geological Survey. And they have created their own complex model that takes into account the influence of kind of your major creeks and rivers, but not necessarily all of your small storm drainage, but then it's also taking into account winds and wave energy. And it's, not something that we have taken on to really drill deep on and understand all of the details of it, but have more or less accepted that this is a highly complex but highly sophisticated and capable organization that is presenting this. So when we show you the tool, we're taking their data, but then we are rendering it into a visual tool that is specific to Corte Madera. So next slide, please. And in efforts to make the data, I think, more relatable, easier to digest, but still accurate, we were able to tie, they were, much of their model on their site references a plus 1.6 foot sea level rise scenario. And that's based off of a datum of mean high water. Again, I don't expect everyone to know this, but we just want it to be here should you need to come back and take a look. We've been able to correlate those datums back to what we're more likely used to, and mean low water, which is what you would see on a typical tide chart, or NAV 88, which is the most common survey data that you would see when you're talking about house elevations. And so in a nutshell, 1.6 feet is roughly the same. 1.6 feet of sea level rise by COSMOS definition is roughly about the same as 6.8 to 6.9 feet of your typical survey elevation. So hope that helps without confusing too much. Happy to revisit that later. Next slide, please.
All right, so now we're going to swap screen sharing, and I'm going to bring up the viewer to look at a couple scenarios. So you should all be able to see the web viewer now. This is just a drone image looking at the Mariner Cove neighborhood. So you can see the school there, you can see Golden Hind Passage along here, Mount Tamalpais. You can look over to the bay. It's a 360 image. And this drone image was taken at a sort of typical high tide today. So this is a 5.8 foot tide. And this is what it looks like sort of on a daily basis. And I'll turn it over to RJ to talk us through the scenarios that we have here on the water level.
So yeah, as we move up to king tide, I think for those familiar with the area, I've lived here, several years, or this probably is a pretty common sight. Again, this is right at your 6'7", 6'8" tide range, and so this is right at the cusp of when we start to see water kind of making its way into the roadway at this location, but not necessarily, covering the entire road or anything like that. But as we start to look at other scenarios, so king tide plus 20-year, and I'm going to call it storm surge because it's really looking at the height of the tide when there's a storm, but it doesn't also layer on what would be happening on the internal side with additional precipitation. So when you have a storm, you have winds, you have wave energy, and that causes the tides to be higher than they are predicted based on atmospheric influences. And so here, that 20-year storm is adding to the height of the tidal water elevation via storm surge. So you'll see at this point, if those were to happen at the same time, king tide plus a 20-year storm, this is what the Cosmos models is saying that we would expect to see. And it's, I think in some areas, in recent years, we have seen a portion of this thus far, but still it's unsettling. It's, not something that we want to happen, but, something we have to be aware of and plan for. And then if you can go up one more, 100-year storm surge. As you can see, it spans, a bit further, and you even start to see it, further north on Golden Hind as well. So again, as mentioned, this doesn't factor into any precipitation that might also be exacerbating this and being trapped on the internal kind of roadways as well. So with that, that is the bulk of the presentation. We obviously have a lot of time set aside for comments and feedback, and I'm going to turn it back to Dave, I believe, to take us to the next step.
Thank you, RJ. Thank you, Phoebe. And yes, so as I mentioned earlier, the most important part of this evening is to hear from you all. Obviously, we wanted to share out some of the information we have and some of the tools we're using to anticipate some of the flooding that might happen in this area. But we'd love to hear from you all now. And this is a chance to do a Q&A. I'm just bringing up standard comment guidelines that you all have seen at any council meeting, mainly just to keep it safe and inclusive for everyone and be respectful. And as I mentioned earlier, we'd like to hear from everyone possibly. So if you can generally keep your comments to a couple minutes, we'll have a chance to come back and allow others to comment. And ultimately, we want to kind of keep this informal as a workshop typically is and hear from you all. And I haven't seen a lot of comments come in through chat. Quentin, I might tap you to see. I think I saw one comment come in here just a minute ago. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screen here real quick so we could all see each other. And I really encourage you all to turn your videos on so we can see your friendly faces if you'd like. And we'll have a conversation. So Quentin, did you see one comment come through? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, there was one comment from Roy at kind of the beginning, and he said that his property was flooded 3 times in 50 years, and all 3 were from an MMW water main break. And then just now, Sachi asked if the water levels also include the water surface elevation. And I imagine that's a question for RJ.
Yeah, Sachi, is that a question about the labels on the viewers?
And
I don't know if she's able to.
yeah, I could ask Sachi to go ahead and unmute. if you'd like. And again, just as a
Sure,
reminder.
yes, it was about,
Go ahead, Seth.
yeah, it was about the labels so that you can kind of see that what water surface elevation that's associated with. I think that would be
Yeah.
useful.
So the challenge is that the water elevation is different at, you know, every point along the shoreline there. So we can't really say the overall water elevation at each scenario because it does depend sort of where you're looking. And the Cosmos model does have that data. So if you're, you know, curious about a specific point, that's something we can look into and share.
Yeah, so I'll think answer it a little more technical way. And so the Cosmos model uses data of mean high water, which is about a 5.8 height elevation. And then if you add 1.6, that's how they view the 1.6 plus 1.6 sea level rise scenario. We're trying to correlate it to what people are more commonly used to, tide charts that they check in when they're looking out the back of their window or going to the beach. And so so we've kind of converted them and associated that 1.6 sea level rise scenario with within the range of a king tide. So hopefully that, I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you, Phoebe and RJ. And RJ, were you referring to Diana's question that came in through chat as well? She has to go back to the 1.6 foot projected sea level rise and clarify further. I think that's what you were trying to do there, but I could bring that slide back up as well if that would be helpful. In the meanwhile, I just want to remind you all, if you do want to contribute, again, we'd love to hear from you. If you want to simply use the raise hand feature that should be at the bottom of your toolbar, bottom of your screen. If you had any comments or questions, this would be the great time to verbalize those, and I'll go ahead and unmute you and we could jump right in. Excellent. I see some hands now. And Bill, we're going to start with you, followed by Susie. So Bill, welcome. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I live right at the intersection of Golden Hine and Ebb Tide. So right, what you were just showing, RJ, looks right down on where I am. And I've always wondered, you know, I saw that the Ebb Tide pump station, you know, might be 10 or 20 years out. And would that have any effect on what you were showing us, or is it, you know, just too much water? Or I don't understand the Ebb Tide pump station and what it could or couldn't do.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So just based on topography and what I'm referring to there is just the land elevations. We've been out there many times and observed that the high point, well, at the lowest point, the tide enters the roadway right around 7 feet elevation. So in situations where it's trickling through, a pump station would help because it can keep up with the amount of water that's coming in, and it can actually more likely push it out faster. But as sea level rise or subsidence occurs, the water gets higher, meaning instead of an inch of water maybe coming through, it's 6 inches coming through. You know, there's a point where the pumps cannot keep up, and they're pushing the water out, but it's coming back in faster, at which point it's just going in a circle and not having a purpose. So the goal, I think, would be to, if a project were to install some sort of flood barrier, to have both features part of that project, right? Increase your elevation, your topography to keep the water out, and then the water that gets trapped from any sort of precipitation event, you can pump out.
Great. Thank you for the question, Bill. And thank you, RJ. Susie, I'm going to go to you next. And then I did see a comment come in from Lisa, and then we'll go to Mike after that. So Susie, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Welcome.
Hi. It's not exactly off topic, but it was a question I had earlier, and that is, in that map where you had the red for high water and blue for not so high, one of the original, I noticed it looked like where Nugget Market is, that area is at high flooding risk. And that's just surprised me a lot because it seems like they are, you know, is that on really low landfill? And is that really the case over there?
So there were two slides that were from our storm drain master plan effort, which is really looking at rain, inland rain, and is not looking at tidal influence. So based on our storm drain infrastructure, there are those areas are more vulnerable, right? If the existing storm drain pipes are too small, or the pump stations are too small, they can't keep with the amount of rain that's happening, then you would have potential flooding due to, rain. So like I said, we're really trying to dive deep on both. It's, I'm just not aware of an agency who has yet been able to really layer those into one model, but by diving into both separately, we can still, I think, paint the full picture that we want.
Thank you, Susie. I'm happy to bring up that slide if that would be helpful. Are we good? Okay, thank you, Susie. So, Mike, we're going to go to you next, and then I'm going to read off the question from Lisa in chat. So, Mike, you should be able to unmute yourself, and then Steve will come to you after that. Welcome, Mike.
All right, thank you, and good to see you guys. RJ, good to see you again. Thanks for the updates. I think similar to Bill's question as well, given that I'm also at Golden Hind and Ebb Tide here, so very familiar with the issues here. I think you're spot on with the potential solutions around having some sort of a barrier or berm or something along with the pump. A couple questions around that. One, when you're looking at the storm drain plans, there's also a fair amount of pooling that we get throughout the neighborhood where we've had some differential settling and things just pool and get moldy and gross and water just sits there for days. Is that part of what you're expecting to see in the storm drain plan? And then the other piece with the bigger project, I heard you mention the pump maybe being like 10 years out. Is that a realistic time frame? And would you expect a pump and a berm to happen at that time, or can you maybe speak more about the expected timing for that kind of solution to be in place?
Sure. The first, I think on, I do want to distinguish the difference between what we often call ponding versus what I typically call flooding. And the difference is when I refer to flooding, I'm usually saying there's a damage to property, typically, like damage, it's getting into people's houses, right? Whereas ponding is, it's there, you see it, but it's not causing damage to private property. So as much, if we had all the money in the world, we would fix both, right? But we don't, so we got to be strategic on what's most important. And so we want to focus on flooding first. And if we've addressed all of our flooding issues in town, then we can start, putting money toward ponding. But we want to focus on the most severe situations with the funds that we have. Separately, yeah, I mean, I guess this is part of the, we're still in draft on the storm drain master plan. This came up, we'll be presenting this in April, but in our draft, it's falling in the high priority category as opposed to the very high. And whereas the very high, there's a number of other infrastructure recommendations that they're saying these are the ones you should prioritize in your next 10-year capital improvement plan. Now that's specific to storm drain. That doesn't, we're keeping this whole sea level rise discussion kind of on its own path and really here today to really hear from you all about, how how aggressive should the town be in pursuing those types of improvements, such as a berm or some sort of flood barrier to kind of keep the tides out. We obviously see the vulnerabilities and we definitely want to move forward and work towards solutions, but we also want to make sure that's what the community wants as well.
Thank you for the question, Mike, and thank you, RJ. I'm going to shift and bring up a question that came up in chat from Lisa, and then Steve, I see your hand raised, and we'll go to you next. Lisa mentioned that the section of Seawolf and Golden Hind floods every 6 years. It floods every time it rains, and there's a tide of 6 feet, and what we could generally do to mitigate that, and asking about the thinking around tidal gates, recognizing that the pump station can't really keep up with this demand. So RJ, I know that's kind of what we're here to talk about today, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Lisa's right on. Right, so the challenge is, when you've got rain and we had an exhibit for this. Sorry, I'm having to use pens, but if you got a pipe, at this elevation in the water, and it's supposed to drain toward the bay, and the water's up here, it's just not going to drain. So it's going to have to wait for the tide to recede before it can let the water out from the street. So that is what's happening at that location. The solution is to potentially put in a pump station where you're pushing it out mechanically, but you would also want to make sure that the grade is high enough so that you don't end up with one of those kind of circular flow patterns I was talking about before, where so much water is coming in that no matter what pumps you put there, they're not powerful enough to push them out. And we also want to consider, pumps aren't perfect. They, even if you have redundancy and you have multiple pumps and a backup pump, sometimes things happen. So you just want to really, I would say, come with a plan that puts you in the best shape, which I think is a twofold, right? Improving your ability to keep tides out at a higher elevation, and also pumps that can push the water that gets trapped behind out, and doing them in tandem.
Thank you, RJ. And I'm going to go to Steve here in a second. And as you all are kind of listening along, I'd encourage you to let us know your thoughts, particularly residents, around how the town could potentially address some of these flooding vulnerabilities. I know there's been talk in previous plans about needing help raising homes. How do we address drain infrastructure? Studying potential bayside protection measures. So we'd love to hear from you all, particularly tonight and as we move forward, your thoughts on those things in particular. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up to help spur some discussion. So I'm going to go to you next, Steve, and then Roy, I see your hand raised. So Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself. Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This has all been great about our current needs, and my main question has to do with the cap. There's been no discussion about the cap. When I went to the cap link on the town website, it looked exactly like the cap from 4 years ago, which I sort of thought was going to be abandoned and a new approach was going to take place. Is that cap that's on the town website now a current document that the town is going to work with? And how come we're not talking about the cap?
Thank you, Steve. So yeah, in the spring of 2021, we had multiple iterations of the climate adaptation plan. Through a number of workshops and feedback from the community, we revised that draft and renamed it climate adaptation assessment to be, we think, more fitting with what the document was. And then also we did withdraw a lot of the details in the shoreline sections. So those are not part of the adopted climate adaptation assessment. However, this effort and potentially future efforts are really the path forward to, identify what are the next steps and strategies for these shoreline efforts. So I hope that answers your question. Adam, you want to hop in on that?
Yeah, I would, and I just think, in a sense, everything that RJ said is correct. And I would just add, this particular effort that we've started and engaging and that we're engaging in right now since last October was identified as the appropriate next step in sort of trying to identify what we should do about these vulnerabilities moving forward. So that is what we're doing for the last 4 months, this whole process, reaching back out to all of you with, we don't have plans in place. We're talking about some of the vulnerabilities. We're trying to get some consensus around some information. And so we have yet to identify what the next steps are. But I will just say that climate adaptation assessment was very useful in starting the conversation. And this process that we're in right now is a direct result, and it's actually one of the implementation programs from that actual document. So I think it is still a very valuable exercise that we undertook. And this is one of the actual of that work that we did at that time.
Great. Thank you for the question, Steve, and thank you, RJ and Adam. Roy, I see your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself. Welcome.
Good evening. I want to thank Adam, Wolf, and RJ for highlighting the importance of settlement. Let's just put on the bottom line is, had we not had settlement, we would not be in a flood zone in the predicament we're in right now, or potential predicament. So I have about a dozen or so questions and comments. Anybody raises their hands, I'm more than happy to step aside for a while. And
Roy, I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm just going to say, if we can take them in smaller chunks just to allow space, that would be great. If you want to start with the first few and let us answer before we move on, that would be awesome.
Understand. That's what I said.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
What staff members do the residents contact about various questions they have related to the Shoreline Adaptation Program? Are there specific staff members who manage different topics? And what is the preferred method of communications? Phone, email, text, meeting in person? My wife Arlene had mentioned that there was a comment on Nextdoor that a person was trying to contact the staff and no one replied. I don't know if she left an email or a voice message or anything. So that's one comment. Any shoreline adaptation solution must be economically rational. That is to say, the cost to implement adaptation measures must be significantly below the cost of flood damage. In addition, we must be mindful about liquefaction disruption or destroying those adaptations, such as levees, in the event of a major earthquake. So we've got a double whammy here in Mariner Cove. Marina Village, we got the water, the floods, we got the bay muds, that can turn to quicksand very quickly. Next comment isn't related to the flood program per se, but it is for RJ. RJ, you don't have to answer this now, but what is the sanitary's district plan to repair the sewer system infrastructure in the event of a major earthquake where many pipelines raise up to the surface of the street, and that's sort of thing through liquefaction? So that would be just a huge disruption. I can't imagine being hit with an earthquake with all the other damage to structures and that sort of thing, and we don't have sewer. Next question.
Roy, do you want to, maybe we'll give a quick sec for team to be able to answer those first couple or respond to them before you keep going. RJ, do you have any?
Sure.
Oh, okay, fine, sure.
Yeah, so generally, Chris Good, our senior engineer, he's our liaison to our flood board. I would reach out to him. Yeah, we respond to people on flood, question topics all the time. I'm sorry if somehow one didn't get through. The other option is to go speak at open time at our flood boards. We generally meet, we have scheduled meetings potentially every other month. And so if anyone has an issue, they can bring it up there and get some feedback as well. But yeah, Chris would be the first step. And then Chris, obviously, and I coordinate and, at least one of us will get back to you. Secondly, I think your other comment was just about sanitary district. So, I mean, we did a master plan, so we're proceeding with that. The master plan didn't go in detail into the seismic scenario, but certainly if an event occurred, we would go right into, detailed assessment of our facilities. And if we found that there was movement, I don't know that they would be out of the ground because they're in that neighborhood. They're generally 10+ feet deep. I wouldn't necessarily expect that, but it could mean that they no longer, flow by gravity down to where they're supposed to. And therefore we have to go and do, whatever it took to, make them functional again. So, yeah, I mean, we're prepared to do that, if that happens, but let's hope not.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I just wanted to note real quick, Roy, that there is a direct email address that was set up as well that Phoebe put in chat, the cmadapts@cortemadera.gov. Just wanted to put that out there as well as another resource to be able to connect with the team.
Okay, yeah, the question is not so much me communicating, but those other folks that want to communicate that just don't know how to do it. So I'm not sure what we do. Maybe we get the signs again at the corners and just say, if you need to contact us, here's where you contact us at.
Well, I'm going to put Chris's email in the chat. So otherwise you can also do our public works counter is also another, basically our general line for complaints. So let me put that first. And those get routed to Chris or I or others for response. So.
See, Arlene just walked into the room. Arlene, on the next door person, did they say how they tried to communicate with the adaptation team? Shoreline adaptation?
They said that they had tried calling and left a message, but nobody ever returned their call. And I think they had tried more than one time, but I don't know who it was that they called or the number.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you all. Roy, I see another hand raised, Roy. So do you have like maybe one other question you want to ask? And then I'd like to.
Yeah, I'll come back in later. That's fine. I only got through part of my questions.
Okay, we'll bring you back in a bit. Thank you, Roy. Nabil, and I'm very sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I see your hand raised. Welcome. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi there.
So first of all, I do want to thank everyone, all the town employees and that have spent so much time getting to learn about this, taking all the feedback from us. It strikes me that at some point, as I mentioned during the last meeting, the town's going to have to make some tough calls and hopefully implement solutions that will affect people disproportionately, like let's say a tide gate in front of a couple of homes or a berm that affects a certain strip of people. And I sometimes get the sense that like the town is being hamstrung by certain parties that have maybe short-term goals of getting out or whatever it may be, that could lead to a scenario where all this knowledge capital and work that's been done to date sort of dissipates and slows down and isn't even handed over very effectively to the next generation of town planners. So I guess part of my question is, what's the plan to move forward after all the inputs taken into place, and how will the people who might be negatively impacted most be compensated, or what's the idea to appease them or address them?
Great question. Thank you. RJ, you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, so as part of this, as we round off this engagement effort, we're obviously taking feedback throughout these workshops and through every event that we have, but we're also planning to do a mailer to the engagement area, and so we can get not just you all that took the time to participate today, but hopefully the goal is to get feedback from everyone, those that didn't have time, but and link the educational material, and hopefully people will take 5-10 minutes out of their day to kind of review it and provide a response, and so we can basically poll and get a sense of what our community wants us to do as town employees.
And RJ, do you want to speak to what we're going to do with that information moving forward?
Yeah, and so as we look at that feedback through the survey and through the process, we'll start by having discussion with council and turn it over to Adam for further.
Yeah, thanks. And I forgot to introduce myself to those that may not know me before. So Adam Wolf, town manager. I think it's a great question. I do think it's somewhat premature. I mean, one of the things that we're going to we'd love to hear sort of from our community, even if it's not solution oriented, but like the approach we should be taking to sort of understand feasibility. Obviously, we want to try to find the most elegant solution there may be out there. And we want to keep everybody whole if we can. So, and we're not giving up on that fact. I mean, it may be in your mind, but there's a lot of work and assessment of feasibility analysis that would have to be done moving forward to address sort of incrementally, I would say, some of the vulnerability sort of are projected at this point to increase over time. But there's ways to sort of, as RJ started this whole presentation, we're looking right now at more of like the 10-year range and trying to address those things. And maybe if we see further impacts at a certain time down the road, in 5-10 years from now, we start to have to plan for the next 10 years. And we'd like to think of it in those terms. We've heard some positive feedback with that approach. We've also are sort of something very different here. We're sort of creating a more customized solution that you're hearing about tonight. Depending on the neighborhood, Marina Village is very different than Mariner Cove. There's different vulnerabilities. And I think, as we've talked about, I know internally, some of the issues in Marina Village are in a lot of ways are more. It's a different and more concerning risk given the elevation of some of the properties over there currently. So that's probably more advanced in terms of where we need to put our focus. But so I don't want to foreclose on the possibility that with additional analysis, feasibility studies, and really communication with all of you as we go through these potential next steps, that we don't find something that really allows us to keep everybody sort of whole and in their homes and in their beautiful neighborhoods that they really we know that you all really appreciate and love for the water access and the views and things like that. So I think that's where we are right now, and the more we can get feedback or even regarding the approach we take to address solutions, that's going to help us and inform us and how we communicate with our council about the next steps of the process. And it may start very small, like it's like studies, versus like saying we're going to do X. And I think that's actually what we'd have to do is start let's do some more analysis and get into this a little bit more. So sorry, that's a long answer, but hopefully that's helpful.
No, it's great. It's reassuring. It sounds like it's a little bit more of like an incremental and maybe iterative path towards solution as we watch the progress and kind
Yeah,
of.
and there's a lot of different things. I think one of the things that we've touched on, I know coming from the the planning and zoning side, I know our team is looking at ways that we can make it hopefully easier for people to consider raising homes, as we go through this, and try to move some of the process out of the way potentially. I don't know. We're open to sort of looking at funding around that aspect of sort of protecting and keeping people, homes at least out of the property damage that may occur going forward. So there's that. There's the storm drain infrastructure that RJ's mentioned. So yes, I do think we're hearing incremental is a positive thing through our outreach so far. And if that's reinforced tonight, that would be great to hear.
Yeah, and let me add to that. So, whether we call it incremental or phased approach, we're being very thoughtful and conscious of not having sunk costs, right? So, if we were to build something that raised our protection level from tides, just a few feet, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet. Well, we're going to build it in such a way that it can easily be added to later. We don't have to, basically tear out what was already constructed. Same thing on a pump station. We're going to try to build it in a way that allows us to, if we need to build it for capacity for down the road and we need more, horsepower later, let's consider that, and let's, build it in a way that allows us to do that at a later date without, tearing it apart, things like that. But yeah, said, we've I think feels like we've been, talking about these various issues, definitely for probably over 3 years, with some, and then not including the breaks in between. And we're looking to reach out to anyone and everyone, not just people that have strong opinions. We want to hear from just the everyday family,
Great. Thank you so much for the question, and thank you, Adam and RJ. Bob, I see your hand raised, followed by Diana, and then I did see a question coming in chat as well, which I'll take in between the two. So, Bob, welcome. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is a very informative program. I think the idea that RJ and Phoebe had for having the pop-up was really quite, seeing is believing. And the pop-up that we had at ebb tide brought a lot of people over there to understand where the water came from with the king tide. And one of the potential solutions to the immediate problem that we have with flooding, particularly in the street and in people's driveways, would be to have a berm behind the maybe dozen homes that are very low now because of settlement or because there wasn't as much fill brought in originally. And one of the questions that had come up from a resident was that, well, if that needs to be done and there's an easement, is that just an easement that the town would use to maintain and repair it and check it? Or they thought there was a concern that the public would be able to walk on that berm behind their house. So, RJ, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, we've heard a lot of concerns over, privacy issues. So, I think thus far the feedback has been, I think, overwhelmingly in support of not having public access. If we were to put a berm of some sort in people's backyards, we're not here to. I think what I just want to keep reminding people, we're not here to force anything that the community doesn't want. So, we're here to basically try to come up with solutions the way you guys want to see it. So, yeah, if you don't want access because privacy, that's what we want.
Great. Thank you for that question. I'm going to take a quick question from David, I believe a member of our flood board in the chat and then come back to you. Diane, I see your hand raised. David asks, will solutions like a berm need to be reviewed and cleared through CEQA? And if so, how does that influence the overall timeline for action?
Yeah. Yeah, all of our projects need to go through full CEQA compliance. There's federal funds. They also need to go through NEPA compliance. So hard to say exactly how long that would take, but definitely a minimum of a few years, if not longer, depending on all the various complexities. But it's been done, you know. Foster City was successful in building their project, and we would just, you know, get with the right team, including an environmental consultant, and go through the process.
Thank you. Adam, did you have an additional thought on that? I saw your hand raised. But you should be able to mute yourself, Adam.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to anything that's done, and I think this is clear to many, if not all of the folks on this call, but you know, anything that's done in the Bay or on the Bay side, there's a host of regulatory agencies that need to be consulted and ultimately get approval from. So you have the Army Corps, you have Fish and Wildlife, you have BCDC, you know, it's a tangle of regulations. And so you don't start with saying what is feasible or what you know, it's a working relationship developed with those agencies, and it's you know, it takes a long time to do that work. And I think what's important is, I feel like if we have the work that we're doing now through this process and through outreach and through getting community involvement and input into what we want to see done, is going to bolster our position and standing with the agencies when we go and talk to them and say, hey, we've had this process, we're working with our community, these are the solutions that make sense to us, and here's why, and here's what we've done to do that. We'll be in better place, at least from I think an agency's perspective that's looking at what to potentially fund, what to help out with. And so I think that's another side benefit, I would say, of having this process at this point.
Great, thanks, Adam. And thanks again for the question. So I'm going to go, thank you for your patience, Diana. I'm going to go to you next, and then I see a question that popped up from Susie, and then we'll go to Marco. So Diana, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Welcome.
All right, thank you. I'm one of those longtime residents, 20 plus years. And when I first got here, high tide was close to 6 feet and then 6 feet. I was here in 1998, so I got to experience that. And now we're having 7-foot tides as high tides. So my question goes back to the 1.6 figure. I want to understand it from that vantage point. Was that a projection, that 1.6 number that you guys presented earlier from Sausalito? Was that a projected increase in tide to 8 feet? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, RJ, do you want to take that? I can bring that slide back up if that's helpful.
Sure. Let's go back to it. So the Cosmos model, its baseline is a datum called mean high water. So at this location in Sausalito, its baseline is 5.3 feet.
Okay.
So when we say 1.6, plus 1.6, it's 1.6 higher than that. So 6.9 is what they're going to show you in their Cosmos model. When they say plus 1.6, it's plus 1.6 higher than 5.3. But what is, I think, we're trying to untangle for everyone and also ourselves is just when we look at tide charts, they're using most commonly this datum of mean low water, which is, so if you go up to, so plus 1.6, you're at 6.9 to mean low water, got 1.17. That is a 6.7 tide if you were to compare it to a tide chart data.
Okay, so it's not a projection, it's talking about king tides today. That's
Yeah.
not a.
That's based, so we believe a 6.7 mean low water is in the range of what we would see a king tide today.
And that's exactly what we experienced. That's about right. Okay, so
Yeah.
that was
There's sometimes a little higher, maybe there's sometimes a little lower, but for for our purposes and planning and discussion and really just trying to get the different concepts across, it's in the range.
And I suppose that there aren't projections because there are so many variables.
Oh, no, there's certainly, the state has issued projections in 2018, and they actually have publicized a draft of more recent projections, which are slightly less. So those are publicly available, but I think what we've seen enough of is that, because some people are less willing to believe the projections on sea level rise. What we're saying is take sea level rise out of it. We still have vulnerabilities even if we ignore future sea level rise.
Oh, I'd still. I would
Just
still.
Settlement, just because of the natures of storm events, etc.
So that was my last comment. Is I was surprised to hear about the settlement, but then again, why was I surprised? Because for a while there it had slowed down, but now because of the increase of climate change, it has increased again. Is that what's happened? Like the subsistence, has it now it was on a, go ahead.
Oh, I don't, I don't know that there's a link between sea level rise and causing more subsidence. It's just, think of bay mud as like a sponge.
Right.
And so it's, the native bay mud has been there presumably thousands or millions of years, right? It's that big wet sponge. And then if you were to put a soda can on top, it's going to depress down. But imagine if that depression was spread out over 100 years, right? And so that goes back to 1958. We put a soda can on it, and it's not done depressing down for 100 or so years. We're, whatever that is, 2/3 of the way there. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dana. Thank you for the question. So Marco, I'm going to go to you next, and then we're going to address Susie's comment, and then we'll come to you, Sachi. So Marco, welcome. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Firstly, thanks very much for holding this. Great community involvement. Appreciate that. Tons of great information. I will caveat my question with the fact that I was in my car for most of the presentation. I guess my main question is, what is the feedback that you're looking for? What I understood from the presentation was a ton of information, ton of really interesting information about what would happen with, sea level rise, etc. Are you looking for feedback on the process you're going through? Because we've also started to talk about solutions, but I'm not sure if solutions were covered specifically or what they looked like in this presentation. A lot about berms and pump stations and barriers and all that stuff. So just what are you looking for in terms of feedback?
No, great question. And I'm happy to distill it down, and my answer might be slightly different than Adam's, but I'm going to give mine. So, when we were in the midst of the climate adaptation assessment in 2019 to 2021, we had, 2 years worth of effort, and everyone that was engaging us in that first 18 months, was really, supportive of looking for solutions, finding ways to basically move these projects forward. And then in the last 6 months, we experienced a completely different thing. We heard from, dozen very vocal peoples, and then we also received a petition that we believe had a lot of inaccurate information in it. But that petition was signed by, I don't know, 400, 500 people. So we're trying to make sure that our community is reasonably educated and is looking at accurate information. And we're looking to get feedback now under the assumption that everyone understands all of the factors that are at play and using that information to guide us in the future. So we're basically we want to overcome if we want to build something, let's overcome, some of those past data points, and let's kind of show that, we do have support for our community to push us forward, because at times we've had a number of people say, do not. And to say what is the next thing, I mean, I don't know what the exact dollar amount would be, but I'll give you an example. So Marina Village, we saw enough concern if that levee were to break that it would have pretty major impacts. So we've applied for a FEMA grant to start design work to retrofit and upgrade that facility. On the Mariner Cove side, we also see it's a vulnerability, but not as catastrophic. It's more going to be year after year, it's going to get a little worse, right? But you also could have a big storm event that could come through and, also cause some damage. But, whether it's $500,000 or $1 million, should the town invest or apply for grants to fund that next, level of planning, design work and whatnot? We're not even really contemplating, the cost of construction and implementation. We're really just, the next step is to better understand it, do the technical work, do more outreach, develop those strategies together. So should the town, either invest or obtain funds from others to, say $1 million worth of future efforts? Or are we wasting our time? Are we just going to, is it an uphill battle and we just need to go away for 5 or 10 years?
Thank you for that question, Marco. I just wanted to note, I forgot to, before we got into the question, because we're having such a great discussion, we have about 5 minutes to 7, which is what we had allotted for this meeting, but I think we are more than willing to stick around much longer if we need to continue the conversation. But I just wanted to give you all a quick time check to respect your time, recognizing that we were originally planning to wrap up at 7. Adam, did you have a thought you wanted to share?
Well, just because I think it's important and it's a good question, I would just say, one, we want to, as RJ said, should we move forward with some effort to try to find solutions to the flooding vulnerabilities that we're talking about this evening? Secondly, if so, what are the range of things that we should start to consider? And we've thrown out, if you have, we want to hear from you. Are there ideas that you have? Are there concerns? Are there considerations? You all live in the neighborhood. You see very closely what those issues are, but help us and inform us how we create sort of a strategic approach to thinking about solutions. So it's sort of, I would call it that 2-part. Do we have support to actually propose and start analyzing and studying some solutions? And if so, what are your thoughts about how we should approach that?
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, so I think kind of what I'm interpreting from Adam, should we be putting our effort more into streamlining raising houses, or should it be put toward this flood barrier,
or the storm
else?
or the storm drain infrastructure,
yeah,
or all of those? Yeah.
Yeah, to that point, Susie had asked what the town is doing now to help folks that want to raise their houses, knowing that that permits need to be issued. Are those fees potentially being lowered? Are there other processes to help kind of speed up the permitting process? Adam, do you want to respond to that?
There
Yeah.
could be, yeah. I mean, at the moment, we sort of help people through the normal process. We have current codes. We're starting to undertake some sort of streamlining efforts, but they haven't been implemented. So if that's something you want, that would be helpful feedback. Like the town should help us sort of get our own homes out of the, raised if in an easier manner or something like that. That's helpful too to know.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Susie. I will say, Melissa had also noted she appreciates the need to analyze and plan before we execute a plan, but would like to see a timeline of that phased approach and checkpoints backing with the team and the time range that those actual solutions will be implemented. And I think that's all that we're talking about now. We're not quite there yet, but as that information does come to fruition, as we move through the next phases, I'm sure that will be a critical part of the process to continue to share back out with you all. So Sachi, thank you so much for your patience. I see your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute, and then we'll come back to a couple other chat comments. And again, thank you all. It's 7 o'clock now. We're going to continue to power on here and answer some more of your questions. So thank you for staying with us. So Sachi, back to you. You should be able to unmute yourself now. There you go.
So in the interest of disclosure, I am a flood board member. I'm also I'm at 323 Golden Hine. So anyone who goes through the neighborhood will see us in mid-process. One of the observations that I'll make about having been on the flood board now for a couple of years is that the issues and the reasons for drainage and ponding really vary through the neighborhood. So I think that what will come out of things like the storm drain master plan and these efforts is the kind of, we'll say, somewhat targeted and geographically specific items that kind of need to address these different kind of issues within the neighborhood. House raising is one. We're choosing to do that just because we know that the timeline to do some of the bigger projects is going to be long. Those of you who think that think something might happen next year to go to construction, that's just not these projects advance. And so I would encourage people to stay in tune with what's happening in flood board, because I think a lot of the items will probably come to the flood board first before on to council. And so, and to continue to attend these meetings, because as things develop and as town staff and the flood board and consultants come together, that this is the venue through which this information is going to get disseminated. So I don't think I've spoken out of turn, Adam or RJ, but I just wanted to put that plug in.
Thank you, Sachi. That's very helpful. So let's see. So I see a few more comments coming in here through chat. Diana referenced, what if the town helps fill in backyards? That would help, or fill in the yards in general. Mike suggested putting a vote toward a reasonable height berm behind homes in Golden Hines and near the marsh. Thank you all for your comments there. I do see another hand raised, and Roy, thank you so much for your patience as well. I'm gonna come to you next, Eric, and then we'll come to you as well, Roy, and keep those comments and suggestions coming in through chat. And we'll go from there. So Eric, over to you. You should be able to unmute yourself. Welcome.
Good evening. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you guys getting everybody together and vetting all of our concerns and listening. I just wanted to take a second after hearing both Adam and Sachi. Sachi's in the lifting process, and based on what she just said and the timelines we're all looking at, I really do think that if the town can lend support to those of us that are interested in raising our homes, to whatever they can do in terms of fee waivers, expediting processes, I just feel like there's a lot of red tape that could probably be removed, and Sachi can probably speak to that better than I can. So I just wanted to take a second to voice my vote, our vote, my wife and I's vote. We're at 299 Golden Hine Passage, and I've already sort of started the preliminary process of looking into what we're going to do. We haven't decided how high and when and all that, and are still in the early phases. But whatever support, it just seems to me that, you know, that's an easy way that the town can start, you know, lending its support to those of us that are, you know, sort of on the front in terms of facing the water, and how we can actively do something right now, as opposed to waiting out the 10 years or so, and the dangers we might face in the interim. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, no, that echoes Susie's suggestion earlier as well. So we appreciate that feedback, and I'm sure it's something the town will consider. And thank you, RJ, for throwing in the link to the flood board meetings. As such, you mentioned another great opportunity to stay in tuned with these type of topics moving forward. And there will be more information brought to them as well. So I don't see any other comments popping up. Roy, I'm going to come back to you now. Thank you again for your patience. If you wanted to ask a couple more questions here, and then we would love to show you a couple wrap-up slides in this great tool that's on the website as well, to continue to gather feedback from you all through a great mapping tool. So with that, Roy, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. Welcome back.
Okay, I'll give just one of my questions. The remaining questions I'll mail to the staff.
Great,
so
thank you.
You'll look at them and respond whenever you can. So question or comment and question I have is raising the structure, the house, a viable option for some or all houses? I tried for approximately 2 years to get contractors to quote the cost of raising the house. It was a major hassle and would have been very expensive. There were conflicting town ordinances, the engineering, soil testing requirements, architectural plans needed to be completed before contractors would even give a high-level cost to raise the structure. One contractor asked, "Why do you want to do this now? Just wait for the flood and collect the insurance money and have the work done then." Okay, has the town, because the question I have, has the town eliminated the ordinance conflicts and developed a streamlined process for the property owners to get accurate quotes and raise the house?
Thank you,
Anybody want
Roy.
to address that right now?
Thank you, Roy. Maybe, yeah, I'll give Adam a chance to address that. And then thank you for mailing us the rest of your comments or emailing us. Adam, over to you.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't call them ordinance conflicts. But there are certainly ordinances such as requiring design review for somebody who wants to raise their house above a height of 15 feet. And that's been on the books for many years throughout the entire town. And those are some things that we're currently looking at of eliminating in areas that are in the flood zone, precisely for the reasons that you mentioned, is that if you're just taking your house and putting it on stilts, why are we doing design review? It's a very valid question. I think we'll be having an ordinance adjustment there to take care of that. That will eliminate some costs. I think along with that, people are going to have to recognize you're going to have the reason that ordinance was in the first place put in place was because you have then privacy impacts and things potentially with houses, some raised, some not, looking down onto each other. But I think that's fine for this neighborhood, in my view. So other than that, I think we're happy. We're always, our planning staff and Amy's great, in terms of just, we're always happy to work with you and your contractors, or to figure out what you're hearing on your end to try to smooth the process, whether it's between you and our town ordinances, or between you and getting the information you need from contractors. And I, there's oftentimes different information given. So that's a conversation. We're always here to help on those. But certainly there's more work that we could do on removing costs and some of the, call it red tape, if you will, on sort of the regulatory side. That would otherwise impact or make it a longer process to raise homes.
Great. Thank you for the question, Roy. Thank you, Adam. And a couple of folks had asked whether this presentation will be available. Yes, it definitely will be. It will be posted to the project website, and links have been dropped in the chat with that. And I'm also going to bring up the screen again with some more information about where to go to gather some of that info, including this recording of this meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy. Not seeing any other raised hands, we're going to go ahead and just kind of show you a couple next steps in this great tool we have available, and wrap up the meeting to let you all go enjoy the rest of your evening here. So Amy, over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Good evening. I'm the Community Development Director, somewhat new to the team. And I'm just going to take you through some of the next steps, as Dave noted. So we've been working on doing some engagement with you all and other community members for the last 6 months or so. So this Zoom workshop was one of 2 that we've done recently. And then we will be sending out a survey in the coming weeks to your mailboxes. And then we'll be taking all that input, synthesizing that, and then coming back to our flood board and town council to have more conversations on what next steps look like and what the community vision is. So we can go to the next slide. And so we do have a new tool on our website we wanted to talk to you about, and that is a mapping tool. So this is another area where you can provide your input as a homeowner or neighborhood member, and also you can provide us photos or other things. But there's a spot on our website where you can go and you can actually put a pin in the location you want to note, and say whatever you'd like, give us information, send photos, and that's everything's going to be available for others to see as well. So it's a great place to kind of build on each other's information and thoughts. So make sure to go to that. There's the in the chat there, someone put the link. Thanks, Dave. And so this is our website. And then as noted earlier, we do have a dedicated email. So you can always contact us here. There's a few of us on the town team that have access to that, so we're pretty fast. And yeah, so we're here to get your input and to help you with anything as you navigate what you would like to discuss or talk about as well. Yeah, so with that, I'll turn it back to Dave, but really appreciate everyone's engagement tonight and joining us.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you all again for spending some time here with us tonight. As we mentioned earlier, all this information will be posted to the website if you wanted to go back and kind of check any of the slides or the presentation. We'll also put together a short summary and post that to the project website and email that out through the email blast that you might have found out about this meeting. And again, just please do stay tuned to the project website for upcoming information and events. And thank you again for your time. If the team doesn't have anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap the meeting. So have a great evening. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Take care all.